Somebody's got to add that to every prayer everybody makes from now on. So a couple of things to get us started. I thought we'd begin in a more conversational mode and try to be very courteous to those on Zoom, because there was some feedback from some of you yesterday that you weren't quite sure about the purpose of the training. That makes sense. It's a huge subject. It involves questions of theology, spirituality, real estate, futures, and the and the incredible changes that are happening in the world of religion. So it also involves church growth, how we personally feel about God and our own leadership. It involves just about everything. So it's a big, big subject. And I want to hear first from you why you came, why you're giving your precious time, what you want out of it, why you would bother, to put it bluntly. And then I'll tell you what I think the purpose is, and then we're going to negotiate it so that we custom design this time to you all, starting immediately. I can keep the slides up. We know what we want to do, but I know how to custom design it. And you do too. All you do is tell the leader to stop going that direction and come back to what you said you were supposed to be talking about. It's very simple. And I appreciate that kind of teaching and learning. And I also would like to suggest that this afternoon or tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, I leave on Friday, that I could come visit your church and take a look at it. And, you know, I just think that would be so much better than not having seen it. So we'll schedule that, you know, as we go along. Maybe, I don't have a car, but I can walk places, and I love the trolley, so I'm on the trolley all the time. And, you know, and also I can get a car, so it's easy enough to figure it out. But I think that since we've had this lovely time in this great building, I would like to see the rest of the buildings. And, you know, we might even do it today if there's, you know, a time or a way. But let's put that in your mind and think about it. Who would like to start? I think maybe I'm going to ask you to start because you only have a brief time today to do your appointments. Okay. Yes, you do. Yes.
We can take this and pass it around. As Gianfranco mentioned at least 8 times yesterday, we're friends and have known each other for a little while now through his role with Partners for Sacred Places and also in his role through the National Fund for Sacred Places. And so when this new opportunity came up, he really wanted me to meet Donna in particular and wanted us to be part of what Bricks and Mortals is doing toward helping congregations find sustainable solutions for their building. Clearly yesterday, as soon as Donna offered any of the tiniest little bit of grace about how hard this is, I fell to pieces because it's hard, because we love these places. And I'm the pastor. I didn't grow up in this church, but I love my people, and amazing and beautiful things happen here, and I want us to keep this place open, but it's more than we can afford, and it's more than we need. And so we've taken some steps toward sharing our building. We have 20 community partners using the space, because one of the lines I've continued to repeat here is, I'm not interested in preserving a museum to 20th century white Christianity, but I am interested in having a vibrant community hub that is sacred space for all. And so if that's what we're talking about, then I've got a lot of energy to talk about the building and plaster and fundraising. But we've gotten big enough in the community partner part especially that we need some help formalizing it, because there's so many interruptions and there's so much building stuff that happens all the time. I feel like I wear this much of a pastor hat. I'm about to leave and go to the funeral home in just a minute here. And then sometimes I'm the plumber hat, and Mark is helping me with a lot of that stuff now. And sometimes I'm in my fundraiser hat. And then there's this also like graphic designer. There are all these different pieces that I'm picking up that not just wasn't trained to do, but maybe I'm not good at all of them. So we need help making some kind of plan for this. What's the next way forward for 2 to 5 years out that isn't just best for the building, but is also best for the congregation and for the staff and not wearing everybody out, and best for community partners because they get frustrated too when the air conditioning's not working and they're seeing clients. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but that is what I'm hoping over the next 2 years we'll kind of grow together and get some tools from this program that help us to formalize. Okay, you say you want to share your space with people. That's actually really hard and messy. So how can we do that in a more beautiful, gracious, and efficient way?
I wasn't sure at first what this was all about when the secretary called us up and was asking for names of people they wanted to come attend. I was kind of apprehensive because I just didn't know what I was coming into. I didn't know what to bring here, but I brought a tablet to take some notes. But anyway, I'm listening at what you're saying with this sustainable solutions for sacred sites. So when I heard you yesterday talking about using your empty church spaces for better uses than just being not used, I even heard you say closets. You was using closets space. I don't know how you got that, but anyway, at my church, I'm retired now, so I have a lot of time. So a lot of times pastor asks me to do some things that other people are not available to do. If somebody's coming to the church for some repairs, I have to sit there and wait between 4, 12, whatever time they say they're going to get there. And a lot of times I feel like I could be doing something else. But while I'm there, I see the community a lot. I see the people who actually live around the church, and they'll see me and ask me, why isn't the church doing something for the community? And I don't know what to tell them, but a lot of our members don't live in the community. They come and worship there every Sunday, but a lot of them don't live in the community. But the community is looking for the church to give them some kind of help. But the church is in a financial bind itself. With no members coming, there's no revenue coming in with no members, but the community they don't want to hear that. And so just listening at what you were saying, you was talking about moving the pews and making space. That's reasonable. That sounds sustainable. And I'm just trying to grasp it all and take it in, see what could work, what can't work. So, but you enlightened me yesterday with the purpose of this meeting. That's it for me.
Good afternoon. I think both of you have said something that we all are sharing. Our demographic has changed, within the community. We have several members that live in the general area, but the majority of them do not, live around the church. And the demographics around the church has changed. As I said, at one time we've had a majority African-American community. Even though we are an AME church, we cater to all. It's called African Methodist because it was founded by an African. But we're open to all to come. We are a historic site, so it's very expensive to maintain. And like you said, with the decline in membership, revenue is hard. As far as why attending this session, it's more of a thinking out the box kind of thing. You've expressed some opportunities that are out there that we never even considered. We were just looking at us for, what could we do instead of trying to grasp, not just use the church for a Sunday service, Wednesday night Bible study, what can we do to fill those other days? Establish partnerships, with communities. Somebody said go, see the mayor, talk to your council people, and all these are things that were really not even considered, just never even came to mind. So it's just giving more, insight, and then also engaging the membership and, getting them more involved, motivating, because we do, as I said yesterday, we do have an aging population. A lot of people want to do things, but they don't necessarily want to do them themselves. I told you my favorite story, Little Red Hen. Everybody wants the bread, but nobody wants to do the work to get to that point. So that's what we are. So I'm just trying to learn, what's available, what can we do, to just get the whole process started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Same as Melvin. Melvin is our everything at our church. He is our steward, our trustee. He does everything for us. And so, he probably see the community. I live not too far. I really live in a community, I want to say. I think we're about the only family that lives in the community. So when Melvin King come, my sister availed herself to try to be there. I haven't been living, I've been back in New Orleans since 2013, and I heard a lot. We've had at our church a lot of different programs that they went out, and I heard that they had this computer class at one time. So they were, I guess we were at one time going out to the community or going out and asking the community and our local officials to help us out with different things. I think they had the Wisner Foundation donated stuff for us at our church, but we've gotten away from that, and I don't know if the person who was able to find those grants or find the way to do it is still at our church. Same here. We have people who, we want to do these things, but it's the same people who are going to do it. It's the same 2 or 3 people. So, yeah, we would like to help, be able to revive and restore our community. And we like to go out and help our community as much as we can, but I just got to say this. I went out one time for our children. I went to Walmart, and I asked them, can they donate, I think, through school supplies or something like that, and they told me to write a letter. So I'm hearing you guys say, well, don't write a letter. I verbally approached them. I verbally approached them, and then they say to write a letter, and I never got around to doing that. I just never got around. It was a couple of years ago, but we're here to learn and grow and see what happens, to see if we can get those foundations to come back and support our church again and help us out, and hopefully our members are willing to help as well.
These grants, you have to have somebody who write the grants, huh? You have to have somebody who knows how to do that.
Good morning. We are here to see what it is that you all are offering. And there are different things that we need for the church. Our church is 130 years old. Our congregations are much older now. We have fewer members. We have a lot of things that need to be done, and we're just trying to find out whatever information we can put together and where to go from here. Because we do need assistance. And we are lucky that we work with the food programs. We do those, and we've been working with community groups, and we're trying to see what you guys have to say.
Oh, whoa. I think part of it is a desire to figure out how to make our space actually work for us. For example, we have a community meal program called Community Table, where right now we're putting out 500, 550 free meals a week in a kitchen that's smaller than the one in my 900 square foot apartment, right? Like, the building we have is not serving the actual work we're doing, let alone the work of the neighborhood. And so this seemed like a way to intentionally focus on the building and say, how can we dream to not just, I mean, restoring what we have wouldn't really help us, because I don't remember if it was Gianfranco or you said yesterday that, you know, it was built for a different era and a different time. And, you know, our building's not like grandly historic. I think it's 1962 or something, and it was built poorly in 1962. But it's what we have right now, and we want to see, like, how can we make, you know, our space and like our property in a big sense work for us.
I would echo a lot of what Elizabeth said earlier. I just came on staff at St. Charles back in August and have learned that indeed the community partners that we have, those relationships are really important, a big part of what makes the congregation what it is. And in my role now, I think even 10 minutes before, maybe 15 minutes before this meeting started, a therapist on the wing over here came and said, hey, I don't have heat in my office. And you know, I'm thinking, well, I'm not an electrician with train. Like, I can't. But and it's not very cold today, right? But it is, I mean, but that's part of the reality of the model that we've adopted in the way that we're working. And she very much wanted to know, what can you do? And that happens all the time. And people are patient and they're flexible, and that's great, and we appreciate our partners in that respect. But there's, whether staff or lay-led, like, there is that real tension of how do we keep and maintain these relationships with reasonable expectations of what the building can provide, and given what it is. And I've got a training session, a 4-hour training session to go to in 10 minutes, and I can't get you heat right now, and I'm really sorry about that. And what do we do, and how to navigate those? This is the new reality. So.
I'll add, and then I've got to go to a funeral home in just a minute, Ben, because I didn't tell you that. I even wonder if we did a cost-benefit analysis. You look on paper, okay, we've got all these community partners that are bringing in $150,000, $170,000 a year in new revenue that we didn't have several years ago. Well, that sounds really great, but what's it costing you in staff time? What's it costing you in utilities? I don't even begin to know. And so then, are we charging a fair rate for that? So there are other questions that come along with the place where we are right now. I really want to stay with you. Oh, I got to go. I'll be back in about an hour and a half. Okay.
Becky, did you want to say something?
Sure. Sorry, I was only partially with you guys yesterday, but I'm a member at St. Charles, but I'm also sort of a community partner. I kind of wear both hats. I was among the members who helped found the St. Charles Center for Faith in Action and continue on the board representing the congregation at the center, which is one of our 20 community partners. And I will also say that I come to all of this from the perspective of having been away for a while. During that time, I was part of a Quaker congregation that was meeting in borrowed space in a preschool, and I loved it because of that. And they wanted a building, and I cautioned them that maybe they didn't really want to do that, but it was given to them by a denomination that no longer needed it. And so it happened. And so I come to this as well from the perspective of really caring more about our ministry than about the beauty of the place that I worship in. And I worry about the resources that have gone into brick and mortar and continue to. On the other hand, I know that the space we have that you all are in today allows us to do things that we couldn't otherwise do. And it was in part built for the purpose of also serving community needs larger than the congregation truly ever needed. And because of that, I really am interested in learning more about how we truly move into a different era and time when we're really making optimal use of this space for ministry and doing it every day and in a way that truly works and that enables the congregation to be able to use this beautiful space, but at the same time to share it widely and well, but in a way that doesn't overburden either congregational members or our staff. So I'm really interested in hearing more about how we go through the rest of this odyssey of sort of redoing our space in a way that continues to function well into the 21st century and serves ministry of all kinds. One other thing I'm interested in hearing about is how to truly build community between the congregation as opposed to just the staff and the community partners. So thanks for giving me this chance.
Hi, this is Sean. Donna wanted me to take a turn. I will say that if I can figure out how to disconnect my little shopping cart anchor thing, I'll escape the perimeter and never return. No, not really. I'm a total pessimist by nature, and this all seems impossibly daunting to me. The inspiring personalities that are involved on the other side of the equation hopefully will tip the scales in their favor and not in mine. But yeah, I mean, I was, our theater company was a member of a collective space for about 10 years. And it shared a lot of the same issues that we have here. We had tenants, we had temporary renters. We tried to make the space available to the public and to the artistic community as much as we could, as cheaply as we could, and it was just a constant battle in terms of figuring out what little resources we had should go in order to improve the space for ourselves and for others. So this is, you know, an exponentially greater challenge here, but I'm interested in seeing how it goes, and I'll do my part and run for the hills if things go south.
Right. Well, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. We'll see you later. So several things we have in common that you said that I heard, and I heard three. The first is the word sustainable. Everybody's in favor of it. Sustainability. The second is for our congregation, for us, our people, and for the community. And that we already understand that the real estate is an instrument of that. That we're not that crazy about the bricks, but we're pretty crazy about the mortals being sustained. And we realize that it's a secondary question, real estate. And some of what we're going to do is show you how primary the real estate is to the sustainability of yourselves, the people you love, your communities, and frankly to God as well. So let me just go into each one of them and be as provocative as I know how, because I want you to feel good about being here. If it's not good for you, I want you to leave. Life is short. And I want it to be very truthful. We have come to talk about the unsustainability of the way we are right now. I'm not pessimistic. I don't even think that's pessimistic. But it is true that most of our institutions are not going to be here in 10 years. I hate to say that. And even if they're there, they're going to be burning people out and destroying people's spirits because they have to overwork. And it's all out and no in. And the function of this is in order to go out. So we're way down the road to unsustainability and to exhaustion. So in my little church in Orient, I've always had large churches, but I decided I needed to be in a purple church in my dotage. And then it was time for younger people to take over at Judson, and they have beautifully. I decided it was time for me to take a challenge and go live by the sea. So you see, it wasn't all altruistic. And the men's group, there are only 5 men in the 60-person congregation, will tell me when I meet them, I don't like to come to church because I can't move those heavy tables around anymore. And I can't mow the grass the way I used to be able to, and I can't pick up the trash the way I used to, and I can't shovel the snow the way I used to. And they'll say, they won't say it like a woman would say it, and I'm exhausted, and I've had it with being up face to face with my shortcomings all the time. They'll just say, you know, we have breakfast on Thursday mornings, and we sit there and eat fattening food and have fun. And when I come to church, all I see is that gutter pipe hanging over, and it makes me feel guilty. Now, what's sustainable about that? You know, it's so sad to me. And I'm not normally terribly generous with men belly aching about things, all right? I'm not. Ask my husband. God bless him. But when they say it so truthfully, I say, of course, this place shames you. And you do know that most Americans think that mortality or frailty is a crime, right? We're so special, we're not supposed to die, or get weak, or run out of energy. So when we talk about unsustainability, it's not a fancy word. It's a fear of death and a fear of not being able to carry on, and that makes us feel guilty. Some of what we need to do is psychologically reform ourselves and say, everything has a life cycle. I have a life cycle. You have a life cycle. We will die. These institutions that we've dedicated our lives to have a life cycle too. And as elders, for the most part, as elder institutions at least, it's the grace of forgiving ourselves for getting old and frail and for setting up work to be such a value. So I think God is going to be fine if religious institutions go out of business. I don't think religious institutions are necessarily going to be fine, which is why we use the slogan to live, exist, survive, to pray another way, another day. And when we figure out how to do that, then the building and its termites and all that comes into play, right? But the building is down the road to those senses of purpose. And they are very, as Becky said, you know, they're very exciting to think about. So I can give you a bunch of examples of how to do it, and I will, but is that, am I saying the sustainability is the positive purpose, but the negative, the other side of it is we don't want to die. And if we do die in this form, we're okay with that, but we'd like to have another form, a kind of resurrection. Or the more appropriate word is adaptation. So we're here to find a sustainable adaptation so that we continue to own the land. The building either changes, gets sold, disappears, you know, but it's an instrument of the next iteration of God's revelation and community work. So I think when we talk about sustainability and our hopes, we need to talk about our fears and unsustainability. What happens if it doesn't work? Maybe some of your institutions are ready to talk about that. This one is not. This one is in a phase of, I would call it either second or third stage adaptation, and I want to work with you all about contracts. This one, St. Charles, yeah. You know, I want to talk with you all, and we don't have to do it together. We can do it in lots of, you know, we can do individual, because that may be a better way to work with this smaller cohort. There may be some things you're supposed to do together, but at Judson, we had to learn how to become best friends with our community partners. We had to treat them like, not like tenants, but like people, and figure out how, and we also had to have very fair and clear contracts, and get to that price point. It cost us, as I said yesterday, 33 cents on the dollar for the $450,000 a year we got in revenue. 3 full-time staff people, that's what it cost. Not to mention the undeferred maintenance and the utilities of the model of hyperuse of sacred space. And we are a third of the size of this property. And it's, of course, it's New York City, but this property is enormous. I mean, I don't think there are enough community partners in all of New Orleans to use this, to sustain this property. But community partners does lead to church growth eventually. So here's how we grew Judson. And I'm going to tell this story because I think it's very important to the aging question. So when I got there, we had 60 members. They were all in their early 70s. I told you that there were no bathrooms working. We broke the final one. The building is a beautiful building, but it was so run down by decades of doing good work. It's on the south side of Washington Square Park, so there's a lot of homeless people, a lot of security issues. You know, it was nothing for us to find, you know, 4 bathroom doors locked with 2 homeless people having set up shop in there. And every time we get the police to come over and open the door, they say, you know, you're going to have us back next week. We're not going to do this. You know, you've got to lock the doors. And so we finally locked the doors, which of course is one of my great sadnesses, but that's what happened. So I had come from a large church in Miami with 20 people on the staff, and I just wanted to be in New York because I was born in New York, and I thought I can do a challenge. And I said to the woman who's chair of the church council, could I just have an intern? Because I had no staff. It was just me. I was everything. And wandering around in this building, wondering where the keys were, pretty much. And she said, yeah, I think we could get an intern. We got $60,000 in the bank. So what's an intern cost? It costs $5,000. And just so I had somebody to be with me, and there's a lot of seminaries in New York, so I got the board to approve getting 1 intern, and I put out a sign that said, we needed an intern, and I got 7 applications, and they were all so good. I said to the board, I have no idea how to pick, because they're all just so good. And Peggy Halsey, the chair of the board, said, oh, let's hire all of them. Right? $5,000 a pop. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is the Holy Spirit talking. She's not kidding. And I said, okay, let's go. And so we had, one of them didn't come, so we had 6 interns, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, in their 30s, people of all colors, all persuasions, a filmmaker, a community organizer, seminarians. And they created a community, and I did group supervision with them on Friday afternoon, paid them the $5,000, and next thing you know, when somebody new walked into the building, they didn't see Mrs. Gray Hair They saw those people. And I assigned them to do, we called it the community ministry program, to go out, meet the community, and bring the community in for free. You know, so that's exactly what they did. So they brought in artists, they set up feeding programs, they set up singing programs, they set up studies, they set up little shelters for gay people. They fixed the shower so that, because gay youth in New York would not go to the other shelters. I bet you know why. Because bad things would happen to them in those shelters. So they did those shelters, and next thing you know, there was this trickle of people coming, and the church was out of money for the program, so I went to a foundation. See how we had to spend our money before we could talk to the foundation? And we had to do something for the community before we could talk to the foundation. But when I showed them what these community ministers were doing with the gay shelter, the immigrant legal counseling, I can't even remember because it went on for 15 years, what projects they were doing, the foundation said, we'd love to support that work. So that work got supported, and for 15 years, the foundation gave us first $30,000 and then $60,000 every year to support the community ministry program, which we took to 12 people in the third or fourth year. So we had the community ministers staying behind and with us, just being members. And then we had the new community ministers doing new projects. So one of them started the harm reduction program in New York City. Another one, I mean, they started the most interest, they worked at Rikers. They just did, I mean, I wouldn't hire them. We usually had about 100 applications for these 12 spots because they wanted, these were young people who were kind of thinking about ministry. We ordained 20 of the 120 interns we had total who graduated. They got a certificate, they got a resume builder, but they rebuilt Judson by just being younger when people walked in the door and not talking about God, but talking about, would you come, can you staff the kids' shelter on Tuesday night? I'll help you do that. And the congregation tipped to people under 40 in about 5 years with very rapid growth. And the second phase was bringing the organizations that the students had created or partnered with in. And so the board and the congregation tipped to people under 40. And it still wasn't enough to deal with the building. It just wasn't enough because we needed a brand new roof, which cost $3 million. We needed an elevator, which is still broken because we still don't have it. So these younger people literally carry up the older people now, as embarrassing as that is because we were upstairs. But it became, between the gift of Peggy Halsey being so generous and her leadership, and the older people in the congregation not being grumpy about the new people. They were grumpy. You know, these people aren't really as good as our former, you know, they don't work hard enough. They don't do enough. They're messy. You know, we work very hard. We always worked very, very, very hard for church. And you hear, I mean, I heard that theme, the hens. In every organization, 20% of the people do 100% of the work, and the other 80 just don't. And young people were not taught work is their value in the same way that we were. So they work different. They want the exchange of meaning and money if they're going to give you a shake. So I mean, in summary, the way to grow a church is to buy some young people.
looking at, staffing issues, before you get all these extra people in, who's gonna be the ones that are gonna be at the church, like
Right,
this brother here,
yeah.
he's like the hand, hands and feet on the ground, doing just,
You should be on this, I'm sorry.
oh, that's all right. I just thought I was so loud. He's the hand and feet, on the ground for doing a lot of the work. But getting your staffing in, if you're bringing people into your buildings, if you want doing these community partnerships, you need staffing, somebody to be there, or do you give them a key? Whoever's going to, be there. Security issues. Do we need to, supply security for the different programs and things that are going to be there, like cameras or in-person security people? Yeah, alarms. Yeah, alarms, security, cameras, actual security guards, aren't, people on site. It's sad, but it's coming to that point, especially if you're going to have, big activities or anything going on. And who's going to be the, we approach these community partners, we do a lot of the work, but a lot of people are not that outgoing or extroverted to talk to other people, I want this, I want to approach you, with the funding, I go to the mayor, go to the council with people, but there are not a lot of upfront people, to do that, and that's a challenge there. And approaching young people, you're right, if there's not going to be some kind of financial benefit or some type of compensation, it's going to be hard to get people in initially. Now, they may want to do it, once they get really involved, like you're saying, the pessimist. And that's a true statement, to get people involved, maybe once they're in there, that might be a different story, but.
I just want to pass the mic.
Anybody else? Anybody? Comments? I mean, so I don't know how it translates as an idea in New Orleans, where there aren't a lot of seminaries. There are a lot of universities. And I tell you, they're looking for internships. And it's a low-cost way of creating a picture of yourself that's different. And yes, everything you just said is true. You've got to supervise them. You've got to make sure they're not doing anything wrong or anything that's going to harm you. But if I show up as an older person with a younger person at my side, I'm a completely different package, right? It's not grandma or mom. It's sister. It's different. And I don't know how we're going to get that if we don't figure out how to pay for it respectfully. And you can't just hire it, right? So that's why I think the intern project is a very reproducible project. And even to these college kids really want to apprentice with somebody like Mark, who's running, who's an administrator of a church. They want to go into not-for-profit administration. They'll even do it for nothing. And there are a lot of people in Black Lives Matter, in all of these youth-led organizations, who would give their right arm to be mentored by somebody like you, who's doing, in his retirement, talks to a community. I don't even know that you necessarily have to pay them, but you've got to be in relationship with them. And I think that it's just a really good way to go. And the second idea is the one that I hope I haven't done already, is the spaghetti ministry. And it's, especially in your situation where your people are coming from outside the neighborhood. And it's also good use for Sunday school rooms. It's free meals for parents, working parents on Friday nights, where the children are taken care of by a well-vetted babysitter. Somebody's got a background check, and the parents know that. And it's a free meal, and it's parents' night out. And it's a simple meal. And when I talk about this idea with churches, I always call it my spaghetti test, because if what I hear back is they'll say there's no young people, and we don't know how to get young people, and we know working parents are just overwhelmed even if they're lucky enough to have two parents, they're overwhelmed after they do their jobs and their thises and their that's. And the free meal, free childcare, white tablecloth, candle on the table, maybe a bottle of wine, something that makes it like I'm at a restaurant, does three things. It says the church wants to give you something, doesn't want to get from you. You do not proselytize or invite people's participation. You do not. You give them food and say, enjoy yourselves. Secondly, they meet each other. Here in both of these examples, there's groups coming in together as opposed to an individual. There's a ton of studies that shows when anytime a person comes back to a church for the first time, in the last 6 months, something terrible happened in their life. So they're looking. They're looking for something. But the social experience of walking into a room and not knowing anybody is horrifying. So not only have you got all your courage together, gotten out your outfit, your Sunday outfit, you've shown up, but if anything goes wrong in that first encounter, you have spiritual disappointment instead of invitation. And most of us don't know how to do anything but stare at the new person and talked about them afterwards. We had a new person at our Ash Wednesday service, and she was mobbed. I thought, oh my Lord. And I didn't know how to unmob her. And she might come back, but it was embarrassing how socially awkward my people were, and she was. It turned out she wanted to have her baby baptized, Anyway, the spaghetti test is if people start saying, well, we could try something like that, then I think, well, maybe you've got a shot. But if what they say, and this is what they say more often, don't you know how much we've already given to this community? They should be feeding us. We're exhausted. We've done so much work. We're exhausted. If that's the response to something like the spaghetti test, it may be time to sell. She said, I don't think you can re-energize after a certain level of exhaustion. And I don't think that's a crime if people get that tired. I really don't. But I think that's the time to move out of the way and let someone else have the resource albatross, or that which has become an albatross to you. Some of the most beautiful transitions I've seen have actually been in Brooklyn, where aging Lutheran churches give their buildings to immigrant congregations. They get down to 7 members or so, and when they do, the most beautiful part of these transitions is not just the ceremony of, here's the key, we've had the building since 1840, it's yours now, we know it's got problems, and the immigrant, the Mexican congregation, the Haitian congregation, the Dominican congregation will take care of those 7 people. It's gorgeous. And then you go to church in that congregation 6 weeks after the key ceremony, just because you want to make sure they're not telling you a lie. And they usher in the elders to the front row and make sure they sing a German hymn. It's really interesting, this theology of gift of ours and how it can replenish and revitalize. Let's take a break. Becky, did you want to say anything?
Just listening, thanks.
And Kate, before we take this break, do you want to jump in?
Donna,
Yeah.
Kate had to leave the call for a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
At
Rebecca,
some point-
and it's up
So
to
yes,
you.
this is Rebecca. Hello. Yes, if we want to take a break, I think that sounds great. We do have a program overview. If we wanted to go back to that after the break, I'll leave that up to you, Donna, if you want to let me know.
I think that's what we should do, and go to
Okay.
Love Thy Neighbor, okay?
Okay. So
Does
we'll
that make
plan.
sense, Rebecca, or what else am I missing?
Yes, just before the Love Thy Neighbor, we had just a brief overview that Kate was going to give. So do you think
Okay.
we could plan for that after the break?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, perfect. I will let Kate know and I will, should we say 10 minutes for break? Is that good for people?
Good.
Okay. Thanks,
All
Donna.
right. Thank you. Everybody get a snack and a cup of coffee. Welcome back. I'm going to introduce Kate and Rachel, and they're going to take it from here. And thank you for the conversation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Kaufman, and I am the Outreach and Research Consultant for the Sustainable Solutions Program. I'm a little new to the program, so I am learning along with a lot of the cohorts, but I am very excited to be joining you today. Unfortunately, Kate is still detained, so I will get us started, and if she's able to join us, fantastic. And if not, I know she's always responsive to questions if there are additional things people would like to go over or understand when I'm done talking. So I guess I can share a little bit about my own personal background. I actually grew up with faith leader parents. I'm in Minneapolis, so I'm in Minnesota. It looks very different up here. We got lots of snow recently. But having grown up with faith leader parents, I'm very familiar with a lot of the ups and downs of religious spaces, architecture, community partnerships, all of these things. And I actually ended up going to school for adaptive reuse in architecture with a specialization in sacred space. And so in addition to helping to support the program, I'm hoping that we all get some really nice tangible takeaways of examples of all the creative solutions that I'm sure you'll come up with, because yeah, every congregation, every community is different and has their own solutions and ways of approaching things. So with that, I'm going to go through some slides. Again, Kate was going to be presenting them, so I will do my best to do them justice. And if you have questions, we'll save some time for those, and we can always circle back to more questions as well. But what is Sustainable Solutions for Sacred Sites? I think Donna's been giving a nice overview. Again, yesterday with Donna and John Franco, we had more context, but the goal is really this key phrase of restoring and reviving sacred real estate. And I think Donna emphasized yesterday how real estate was something that has value. We think of sacred spaces in lots of contexts, but also when it comes to sustainability, financial sustainability is part of that. And so, this is really a conversation of how communities can continue and how you can continue to have effective ministry in your area. And so to do that, there's kind of a four-pronged approach here, it looks like. And that would be through increased revenue, community connections, creating revitalized congregations, and longevity. So hopefully you've gotten a little bit of this information, but I think it's important that we go back through it again. So what is this program providing? So it is going to be providing 4 trainings like this. So you are doing the first of your 4 trainings over 2 years. So that'll be 2 trainings a year. Within that, you'll have a local coach. And so I know it's been a little challenging for New Orleans because your coach, Mark, has been fantastic, but he just started last week. So he's stepped in brilliantly in a short time frame. But we do have that resource for you locally so that you can have somebody who's supporting you through the program in between these training times. And then with that coach, as you've now kind of met each other, you'll recognize there's a cohort of you within your city. And so hopefully, in addition to having a person that's kind of your point person as a resource, you also have the network of each other to be learning and growing through the process. And then from the local level, you now are also part of a national cohort. So we have 5 communities that are doing this across the country. The other cities are New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and there's one that's actually a virtual cohort. So for people that didn't quite fit into one of those other categories. Within that, we're also continuing to grow a resource bank. And so, as Donna and John Franco have been sharing different resources or examples or things like that, we're creating that as something that you'll have access to as a database to explore for yourself for what some of these resources can be. And then that also comes down to some of the technical assistance. So once you come up with that idea or think about what your next steps might be, between the resources of those that are participating as well as those that are leading and this resource bank of materials, we can help make that happen. And then the goals at the end in 2024 that everyone can come together and kind of share their learning experiences, hopefully have some really nice tangible projects and takeaways to make your site sustainable. So importantly, the program does not provide specific funding for the project. What you may have gleaned from John Franco yesterday is there are resources, there are resources available. So helping you understand the resources, would be part of that resource bank. But this program specifically is not giving money for the capital improvements or things like that. So in terms of the commitment, and this might be some of the things that we just want to make sure are clarified, we do ask for a cohort to have a group of faith leaders and also just community members that can serve as a part of your team for the duration of the program. So that would be the same people that attend those 4 training sessions. And that's so that there can be that kind of sustainable thread of creating a project that's best suited for your community. And then this question here of engagement and process between training sessions, I think has come up as well. And so for that, you have your coach, your local cohort leader. We've asked them to support you by having a monthly meeting with them. It's kind of up to them how they would like to facilitate that. But that would be on a one-on-one level so that they can understand your individual needs as a community. And then also as a cohort. So that way, again, there's that network of people local to you that you can understand and learn from each other. And your coach can hopefully support you in that and also relay, questions or other ideas that come up to us through that process. So I think this just came down to some kind of examples for, some communities had ideas of how they want to begin their progress or their project or program. Others are still, in the idea gathering phase. And so I think Kate's included some nice resources and ideas for things of how you can start spinning those ideas around. And again, Donna's been so full of these examples as well, but I'll go through them quickly because Kate included them. So, one example, this goes back to Donna's book, which she shared with us yesterday, but removing the pews from your head, making your space flexible, thinking creatively, adaptively. Also loving this, imagine 5 congregations in your building, arts, paying, not paying, just all of those community partnerships and different ways you could be sharing space. Within that, the idea of being mission consistent, I think that's a really beautiful line as well, where it's, connecting with your community, but also ensuring that, the uses within your building are all something that you can center around. The idea of going green just by using your building more, it's so true. They say the best conservation is use, right? The best way to save a building is to keep using it. And so that is a huge important resource. And then also just the building of partnerships. It's one thing to think about community groups, but what does that look like across political lines or, other resources? And some of that might come back to that asset mapping idea that we were talking about yesterday. Here we come to the don'ts, which can always be a little sobering. Don't keep denying the problem. I myself have worked in buildings where you could sense that for years there was no recognition that a decline was happening. And I think the fact that there are people, participating in the program is a good first step of going, maybe new solutions are needed for long-term sustainability. The next question is, or don't, I should say, is don't rush to take the lowest offer. I think there's something with that, coming back to real estate as an asset instead of a burden, and thinking through how can we be creative instead of just immediately selling. Don't set up a binary between the building and the people. Again, this is, I think the economic halo effect study that was brought up yesterday actually talks about this really nicely, about how integral those uses are to the space that you're within. And then don't think there's a binary between sacred and secular. This is such a truism as well. What constitutes use within your space? Again, that mission focus, and maybe expanding what some of those definitions might look like. And then finally, don't go it alone. Get the professionals. Again, we try to provide resources and advice and the support that we can. It's been brought up, legal advice will probably be needed depending on how you want to structure your programs or partnerships. So, just take the resources and make steps with that advice in mind. So these were fun, some adaptive reuse examples that were included by Kate. This one, as you'll see in Fort Worth, Texas, becomes a community eye clinic. So right inside that first Christian church. Another example here, Judson Memorial, and I'm sure Donna can speak to this and has been speaking to this already, but Judson Memorial Church, where Bricks and Mortals is out of. Just this idea of space leasing, diversifying how your revenue's coming into the building, determining, if it's a missional program, if it's a commercial program. And you can see here just some of the phenomenal statistics of how different spread of community reach was taking place. Other examples, long-term rentals, utilizing those spaces that are less used for long-term income, as this says, doing that through a 501c3, so that could be other nonprofits. Again, kind of ensuring that those that partner with you are mission aligned and that use is something that you can all rally together around. But the fact that almost a quarter of congregations are doing this shows that this might be a really good option to be thinking through who those long-term partners may be. An example here from North Belmore, New York, a farm stand. So putting farmers, land, maybe that's gardening, different ways of bringing food into the mix besides, as Donna was discussing, a spaghetti supper, which is fantastic, but the food outreach, and just how many ways food and community can come together in this capacity, growing it. And then, more food examples. Sorry, I'm trying to, without the picture, it's a little hard to read my slide this moment. But, another example, providing food pantries, meals. Almost every church I know has had some form of community meal, or how many ways you can reach people through food. Yet another fantastic example of an urban farm to table. So again, gardening, container gardening, really thinking about not just the building, but the land and the space around your building as a resource and tool. If we're thinking sustainability and an environmental spectrum, the idea of, a roof, how could you be utilizing spaces to produce things, that go beyond just your local community, but really have global impact, things like turning things into energy saving reductions, which is also financial savings. So it's a bit of a win-win when you can make those investments. And yeah, it's something that really shows, commitment to climate change efforts. Partnering with schools. This is another way to just, infuse new life, young life into church buildings, preschools or daycares. And you can see here, it says 23% of faith communities have a preschool or daycare in their building, with only 6% running it themselves. So having that community partner who can, utilize and take on their knowledge and experience of bringing children into the space in a really creative way and steady income through rent. All right. My puppy barked right on cue. That is the end. That is the end of the official slides I had before I turn it over to Donna. Are there any questions I can ask at this time, or I answer at this time?
Rebecca, I have a question. I'm wondering, with respect to your role, what sort of resource you represent to us as members of this cohort? What kinds of things can we ask you to help us with?
So my role is really to organize the coaches and to make the training successful and happen. And so I would say the coaches are your first line of communication, but I do want to check in with cohorts periodically as well. So I'm still working with the coaches to kind of navigate when that's helpful for them. So my first, like I said, my first priority is supporting the coaches and the trainings. With that said, another part of my role is helping to create basically like a handbook of adaptive reuse examples from the program. And so, that will be, as we kind of get further along, learning from all of you kind of the solutions that you're thinking of and ways that we can kind of point to those as examples for success. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes.
And Rebecca, just so we're clear here in New Orleans, so you said the coach is plural, so each city that
Each
you had
city.
mentioned, each city has a coach.
Yes.
The city of New Orleans, I'm the coach for and the cohort here is us, our congregations, and Union, which is, we've not had, is it Union Bethel? Yes, yeah, so they will hopefully be joining us as well as the process goes on. And so when y'all ask me hard questions that I'm not sure about, I'll turn to Rebecca because she'll be my coach. and we can work together and have that connection to the larger group. So thanks, Rebecca.
Of course.
And Donna wants to chime in too.
Yeah, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, I'm depending on the coaches to let me know and Gianfranco know if there are problems with schedules, like I know there were a couple this time. And if we need to move to nights, we can do that. I mean, there's a lot of flex. We started, we just started. So, and things that are of a material nature, like maybe if we're going to have several units, maybe we have them at the different churches as opposed to at one church. So, Rebecca, I've already figured out, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I need to go to these other churches while I'm here and look at the buildings because that's what it's about. So I'm going to do that. So we will be pretty much in do you know the words organic process? It's a constant evaluation and shift. So we may have slides that, like today, we had to attend at the top to some confusion in people about what we were trying to do. And so we got that out and we started late and we're going different. And frankly, usually Gianfranco would do the second day and I'd do all the first day, but his schedule predicted that reversal. So I think we ended up with a whole bunch of asset mapping before we had enough context. So we're going to be involved in a very adaptive, organic process where we just keep rotating what we do to make it work for you. And that means you've got to say what's working and what's not working. I may know by the looks on your face, but I'm not sure about that, right? So I need plain talk. Yes, please.
Sure. I just wanted to say thank you for that. We had a couple people from Bethlehem that just can't come during the day because they have 9-to-5 jobs. So we would really appreciate, being able to move to evenings. We have people who wanted to come who just couldn't do it. And I also love the idea of getting to meet at some of the different churches, and that sounds really exciting to me. Be hosted in people's home environments.
Yeah, we can talk. I mean, we don't have to set dates and times right now, but evening, I've heard several people mention evenings still, and I think we can definitely coordinate together and make that happen. Rebecca, I'm recalling on the fly in the middle of this, there was the calendar invite for a couple of days in May. Does anyone remember, 2 trainings a year, so this is the first one. The next one, do we have a target date or month or general time frame for when that'll be while we're on process?
Yeah, Kate and I were just talking about that because we also noticed it was scheduled for May. We feel like that might be soon, just based on making sure all the cohorts get their first training in. So I think we'll circle back to you on dates soon, if that's okay. And I should clarify, so Mark has a spreadsheet that should have all the contact information for each cohort. And on that, we're trying to keep preferred availabilities updated. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, and definitely please do work with Mark to make sure we can best accommodate the most amount of people. So we can schedule it that way. Any other questions for me? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're having a question here. The question was, can we continue to offer like a hybrid model of Zoom and in-person gatherings for people who may not be in the city on that particular day or the time of the training?
Excellent question. I will also bring that forward. I know the preferred way was in person just because it allows for a little more organic conversation. But as you've seen, we did it once, so I'll bring that forward to our next planning meeting.
Yeah, I think. Okay, yep, that's great. Sounds like that might be helpful. Okay, any other questions about like process of what is going to unfold organically, as Donna said, unfold organically over the next couple of years? We'll have one more training session this year and 2 next year. And then I will be interacting with the congregations more, through month to month probably. We'll figure out a schedule that works for the congregations, but I'll be in contact more often. But we'll gather together as a larger cohort another time this year for training, and then twice more. And we can certainly get together and have fun whenever we want to. But training-wise, yeah, we'll do one more this year and then 2 in 2023.
And to emphasize, the meetings as a cohort with Mark, you can schedule at what works best for you as well. If that's a Zoom only meeting, because that's what you all can do, then that's totally up to you to decide. So.
Okay, I think we have one more follow-up question.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we can talk, by the end of the day, the question was what might we look forward to in future trainings? So we have some idea of what's to come, but we can talk about that maybe later on when we wrap up. So, yeah. Okay, thanks.
That's very much where I'm going today, is what do we want to do? How do we want to do it the next time? Because that's how you do it organic. So you ever watch a tomato grow? You know how if it pushes some of its fatness up against a vine over here, it'll have a little piece of black. It will refuse to grow in that direction, but then it'll turn around and grow in the other direction. That's what I mean by organic, is when it's not interesting, when it's not working, then we change it. It's ours. We don't come here with answers. We come here with experience, knowledge of what other people have done, and encouragement that it's just so worth doing. It's worth doing. So let's do another more theological unit. This is the one that's often the most provocative and upsetting to people. And it involves what we said this morning about sustainability and unsustainability. How sustainability is a beautiful thing, very hard to get to. I mean, if you think about your own houses, isn't something always broken in your house? The great American comic, Russell Baker, said that the average American house has 5 broken appliances at any given moment, about which no one has done anything. It might be the dryer, that's why you're hanging out the clothes. It might be the dishwasher, that's why you're washing the dishes. It might be the blender, that's why it's sitting there waiting to figure out whether you're going to take it to a store to get it fixed or whatever. So things breaking down is normal. And when you have collective responsibility for things that do break down, that is normal, but you live in a culture of individualism, you have a problem. In your own home, there's no question who has to take care of it. You know, if my blender, I have to take care of it. Or my husband has to take care of it. Or I've got to be rich enough to hire somebody to take care of it. There's no question, but in an individual house. But in a collective house, there's a whole lot of people, 80% of the people would be glad to tell you that the roof is leaking over there. But maybe 1 out of the 20% would be willing to say, I'll call somebody. Right? And what happens in between the original testimony to the drip? Another one springs up. Right. And that usually in most systems, like in my system, there's one woman named Cheryl who does everything. And you know what she said to me yesterday? She said, I don't really get to worship anymore because somebody's always texting me in the chat or after service that I couldn't hear or I couldn't see or they weren't positioned right or the music wasn't loud enough. And it just broke my heart. Broke my heart. And we don't have anybody else who knows how to fix it, right? And that's true of the drip, and it's true of the heat. It's true of all of these things. So you either have enough money, a large enough system, where, thank God, there's somebody in charge of it. That's their job. In a building this big a building, this age of a building needs a full-time person who has complete freedom and a budget to fix it, right? And in most of our places, that ends up, as Sarah was saying, being the pastor. You know, pastors are not plumbers. The first 30 years of my ministry, I did more plumbing than pastoring. Because I was in small churches where there wasn't anybody to do anything and you did everything. And I did mow the lawn and I did shovel the snow. Because that's what you do. Or there's somebody like you who notices and say again. Right. Right. He's saying he's not a carpenter, he's not an AC man, he's not any of this, but it comes knocking on your door, right? Because you're there. And what I really love is people saying, oh, I hate to bother you with this, Pastor. And you say, well, then don't. Why don't you go bother somebody else with it? But you know that you're there for that. So there's a lot of resentment that builds up, and a lot of delay. So when you get to this section here about what's unsustainable about our systems, there's no clear one person in charge of the building, and the building starts to eat away at everybody else. So one of the things you can do is say which insider has the budget, the knowledge, and the time to do it. And the rest of you can just go jump in the lake. And we'll see you, when the person gets reelected every year. I mean, there have to be democratic controls. We're democratic organizations. But democracy without authority, really hard. So many of us who have these responsibilities feel that we have all the responsibility and none of the authority. So authorization of people to do things is tremendously important, and I'm going to get to this first point. But the insiders need to clean up their acts in governance terms and then make decisions to minister with the outsiders. And that's how we'll grow. But if the insiders don't even have good building systems, you can bet they don't have good welcoming systems either. You can bet. that they say all night long, all day long, that they want new people. But every time a new person comes, they don't treat the new person right. Because, oh, come to the meeting and listen to us fight over the drip that nobody did anything about, right? Or come to the meeting and hear us talk about how tired we are of doing everything. I remember in my first solo parish in Amherst, Massachusetts, a single mother, I didn't know that she was a single mother, came in, sat down for worship, and about 3 people, because by the way, this decline in membership has been going on a long time. It didn't start yesterday. There she was, and 3 people went up and said, "So, good to meet you. Would you like to come to the Christian education meeting on Tuesday night? It meets at 7 o'clock. We would love to have you." And she burst into tears, ran into the bathroom, and threw up. And I'm this girl pastor, and "You okay?" I said, "No, I'm not okay. I'm really not okay. I came here to get some rest. I came here to get some spiritual nourishment. I came here for somebody to give me something, and you asked me to come to work." And we wonder why membership is declining. Because every time we complain of even using, and I'm using that 20-80% folktale as an insider with you, as an insider church person, I would never do it outside, to an outsider. Because they're hearing me, right? And they're thinking, she just wants me to come and work. And I do want her to come and work. I want to relieve Cheryl. Don't tell me she has tech ability, because I'll probably, grab her. Because I need somebody. So I hire what I need and make other people pay for it. Because hiring people is different than everybody having to be a volunteer. And in case you haven't noticed, there's something really different in the 21st century about volunteering than there was in the 20th century. 2-career family. I'm a card-carrying feminist. I love to work, and I don't have time to volunteer. Retired people, of course, run our churches because they have time to volunteer, because volunteering is the way we do business, but it's outdated and it won't work. It just won't work. So what we get from the insiders is a lot of complaints about, well, we always did it, we always volunteered. Why are they getting paid? So we have to educate people about why younger people can't volunteer the way we did. And what will happen is if we bring them in on a pay stub, they're likely to stay if they have a good experience. And when they retire, they'll be willing to do that. But it's a different world. It's a different world. And it's very hard for the fatigued resentment to see that. So we have to be understanding about it with our insiders. And in that context of our insiders are the decision makers, they're the stakeholders. We're not going to be able to do anything without them. That's why we wanted 5 people in each cohort, and we need to talk about that, so that when you go back to the congregation, you have a base to make this work. It's not just your idea, because you'll just get shot down. We know that. But it's an idea of enough people. So, theologically speaking, it is the outsider who is most important. Why? Because we don't own these buildings. The remnant congregation doesn't own the land. We do a lot of land acknowledgement. The land belongs to God, and we are stewards of it. And we need to find some people to give it to, ongoing. And if we diswelcome or unwelcome them, or don't learn to speak their language, or don't connect them, we're excluding them. It's called passive exclusion. You know what that means? You're not actively excluding them because you say, oh my God, we just want to welcome everybody here. We want to welcome the whole community here. But watch what happens when somebody dips their toe in. You know, so there have to be places that are safe from the insiders, and I do mean that, where the insiders can't get near them. It's their own group, and they're doing their own thing until they have enough relationship. What Becky said about, I'm interested in the relationships that develop between the newcomers and the insiders. It's okay to have one or two people, you know, connecting, but if you start throwing the whole institutional weight at them early, they won't even rent your space because they won't even think you'll be good for that. You know, it won't be a good vibe because the vibe will be, seriously, you want more heat? Haven't you seen our budget? Right? How do you get people to enjoy being in your house? You say, are you warm enough? Like you said to me, you know, how's the temperature? That's so welcoming, but that conversation you had with the renter clearly wasn't so happy, right? So the outsider is the most important person to you. And that may mean that you have to go outside as you do in your community and talk to those people. It may mean that it's more important for you to be outside than inside your church. And attending the school board meeting in the community, even if your congregation has moved elsewhere. Or if it's depending on which racial way the neighborhood changed, you may have to show up someplace that's different than who you are and do their thing with them as opposed to getting them to do your thing with you. So we teach a thing called the community entry system, which is basically, first of all, of course, you know your insiders, but then you start making circles into your zip code to the north, south, east, and west, and you find out who those people are, and you find out what happens in their school systems. You find out things like that. So let's just talk about that. Do you think what I'm saying is true? I mean, it has a certain biblical ring, in case you don't know it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Right. It's kind of basic.
Not for Moses, with all due respect, to the lawyers. And I think, and that is what, Jesus didn't say, love your neighbor as you love yourself, because the problem is people don't love themselves. It's love your neighbor as I love you. And so that's the language I always kind of lift up. But what you've talked about, I've seen, you know, where it's an overwhelming of a person coming in. It's retired people are able to do the work. And yet we know the message. We know what we're supposed to do. But do I love myself enough to love every person that I pass on the street? It's taken a lot of work. Not because of the people on the street. So.
I think this made me think about, I've been at Bethlehem almost 4 years now. And my first summer, Bethlehem had, 3.5 years of interims and all sorts of stuff. We made up a new liturgical season called the Season of Joy, and did that in September or October, because, and Rose was a part of this team, we realized that everyone was coming grumpy to church, leaving church grumpy and was mad at each other. And there's, all sorts of reasons why. But we, moved the pews around and redecorated a little, and it didn't magically fix everything. But I think we felt like before we had anything to invite other people into, we had to sort of work on ourselves a little bit. Or all of the bad things we just talked about insiders treating new people poorly, were going to keep happening because the insiders were treating the insiders poorly. You want to add anything, Rose?
That's the biggest problem I have in my new congregation, where I've been for a year now. I realized they don't like each other. It just became apparent to me that they just don't like each other, and their way of bonding with me was to talk about the ones they didn't like. And it just happened so many times that I thought, I think I'm getting set up here. And I have a tremendous amount of compassion for the people who don't like each other, living in a small hamlet by the sea, where everything is beautiful, naturally, and then you come into the church and all they do is complain about it. And I think that goes to what you said about not liking themselves. I think there is a certain kind of person that moves to the edge of the world, tended to get away from it all. And then there are 7 families who were the original settlers who stole the land from the natives, and they own these long parcels from the bay to the sound, and they ran out of land to give away, which is what happens to settlers. When you divide the land the 18th time, there's no more land. And then the families start to intermarry. There are all sorts of issues that are actually quite complex. And then they leave, the kids leave, and then the urban exiles from New York City, like me, come running in. And now the original families who were in my church are out of money and older and exhausted, and they're watching their properties and the farms get bought up by people who pay $1 million for a house. And they're living in a broken down house that they can't fix up, even enough to sell it. But still people will come and offer them $300,000 for it. And they say, how dare they? I can't leave. Where am I going to go with $300,000? Away from here, where I belong. So that word belong is we belong to our sorrow and our loss, and we don't love each other. There are some happy retired people around. I know some, but they don't affiliate. They really don't. They go to these, what we call intermediate associations, book clubs, sewing circles, the library. But those are not belonging places like churches assume you're belonging, or you have to believe something. So when you don't love yourself, it's hard to love your neighbor, and even harder to love the stranger. So when I interviewed for this job a year ago, I looked at all this land that they had, and I heard them complaining about the rich urban exiles, and they have taken over the place. It's like half summer homes and people with 2 houses, and which is an amazing thing in the world of Jesus, if you think about it. What would Jesus say to somebody who had 2 houses? Pretty clear, it would seem to me. who are you going to move in? Who's going to come live with you? So of course they have class resentment, and they have historical resentment, and I mean all of that. And they have like 4 acres, a beautiful church, a beautiful outbuilding, a beautiful office building, and a beautiful parsonage on 4 acres with a playground, and about 60 people. And I said, well, this would just be the perfect place to build some affordable or workers' housing, because the biggest problem on the island, what do you think it is? Their kids all move away because they can't afford to live there, so they miss their kids, and they can't get any help. They can't get people to shovel the snow, they can't get people to do the gardening, all the things they need. They cannot get any help. So what would be wrong with a church building worker housing on its property? And I suggested this, and you would have thought I had pooped on the lawn. I mean, it was horrifying. Is it affordable housing in Orient? I said, but what about, you just complained to me about your child not being able to live here. Yeah, but then you're going to bring in all kinds of people. It was heretical. So I actually got a sock and put it in my mouth and sat there with it and decided not to say that again. And then somebody, of course, took the sock out of my mouth, which I thought was good. Right. 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 We've always done it that way. So that's the language. Let's try to respect that language of the one who belongs. It's the language of belonging. I belong here. This is my place. And that's supposed to help people. But as it turns out scripturally, it makes you dislike yourself or not like yourself enough. Then you don't like other people. And the stranger is up a creek. I mean, up a creek. Don't deserve, I mean, the poor get blamed for their poverty. The stranger is excluded. And things get worse. So as positively as I can be about belonging, just notice the second point. There's a ton of conscious and unconscious fear in many congregations because the people who are currently active and showing up belong, and belonging is hugely important to people. So when you're not feeling good about yourself and somebody's trying to take away the one thing, that place where maybe you do belong, it's very threatening. So before we can do what we need to become sustainable as sacred sites, we have to get a hold of our internal systems. Decision makers, people who are exhausted, who are great people doing all the work, and people who are exhausting you because they're so resentful about doing all the work. We have to get a hold of the insiders and get them out of the way of the outsiders. So that's the kind of work I will do with you individually, because I think you all have different levels of that. Not everybody has the same, but it is a common theme in Bricks and Mortals about how you make decisions about these buildings. It's a big common theme. Rose, yeah? Were you going to say something? Oh, okay, yeah. A common theme. And I think Carolyn, right? Your name is Caroline, thank you. There is a false binary between the insider and the outsider. Because when you're exhausted, you feel like an outsider in a place where you're supposed to belong. And a lot of outsiders are desperate to belong someplace, but they don't know if they can take the social, they don't know if they can take the hassle of getting in. Well, people will say to me, how many years would it take me to be a part of this place? Right? I need it tomorrow. I need to belong tomorrow. Well, it doesn't work that way. And I think we've already had some good conversation about love thy neighbor as thyself and the stranger. And then returning to the second naivete and what that means. And really, this is, from my point of view, scriptural. You must be born again and again and again. And change again and again and again. So that some of what we want from you is your own personal conversion to a depth that will allow you to take leadership around the treasure in an earthen vessel that you have. I want something to happen to you inside that gives you strength to do the work you have to do. So strengthening your resolve and getting some of the crappy things out of the way is kind of my objective. And that means that I have to do much less talking from now on, and you have to tell me stuff or try stuff. Questions, comments?
So something that's very present for me, and my now 21-year-old niece was here at Christmas. She turned 21 in February. And I was telling her about the work I do with the center, and it's based here at the church, and getting younger people involved. And she said, I won't go into a building that says church. And so a piece of what I'd love to have us talk about over the next 2 years is curb appeal. And we've got curb appeal that we're talking about here at St. Charles, about working with the courtyard and making it prettier, but also what is the message and how do we deal with that? That for me, St. Charles Avenue Baptist Church, that name has resonance historically for my life. But what does it mean? We're a vibrant corner. What does it mean for all of these Tulane and Loyola kids? And I started to say Franklin High School. You know how long ago I graduated. But for the folks who are coming by on the streetcar who might say, that's a really beautiful building. Oh, it's a church. And so how do we talk about curb appeal to say we are, not just welcoming because we say we are, we put banners out front, but that we are a structural asset to the people who pass by. It's the issue of the church, and I did it in my 20s as well, and part of my 30s a little bit. And that was that there are people that the church has harmed. There are churches that have messages that still harm and are not welcoming. And there are people who believe that all churches have that. And she's a rebel. I don't know what else to say. I mean, she's got my name as her middle name, so.
A lot of churches are still unwelcoming. There are restrictions on who you would welcome in your church. LBD, people, are not welcome in a lot of churches. Sunday, 11 o'clock, they say is the most segregated hour in the country. Different thoughts, that I think you're having a lot of churches that are coming up. We have the traditional Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Lutheran, Jewish, but then you're having these non-denominational churches going with, a whole new dialogue too, so that could be it. And a lot of these buildings don't look like churches from the Gothic, point of view.
Anyone else?
Yeah, what you said, I mentioned, I think we have a community meal program at Bethlehem, And, you know, if I had a dollar for everyone that's told me they're coming to church on Sunday, just in the last 4 years at Bethlehem, I, you know, would own a house. But the volunteers for our meal program are probably 3/4 not members. And I get a lot of them from mutual aid groups in town, from, you know, young people who live in the neighborhood. And what I found is that if I ask someone, will you come and help us prepare a meal to feed the neighborhood? Usually the only determining yes-no factor is like, does this fit in my schedule? If I ask someone, you know, at this great church, you know, we have even if someone else is preaching or whatever, like if the invitation is, would you like to come to church, or, you know, come to church, we'd love to have you, there's like 9,000 things that have to align before they're going to say yes to coming to church. And so I think, you know, you're exactly right about like it's the church on the front of a building, and if you can't communicate what else it's about, it's going to be a hard road, just because there's, you know, the baggage of church history has left us with a, you know, tainted and often white supremacist institution when you think about Christianity as a whole.
Echoing what you said about if you had a dollar for every member. You know, it's just like when our pastor tried to tell us, we have to set aside time to study the Word. And no one want to value that time to come and serve or do something, you know. It's hard. You fitting it in that schedule like you have. I know I find time to run or walk every day. But do I find time to study the Word? You know what I'm saying? So it's just, you know, it's just finding that time to do something. You know, I was just thinking about that. I know our pastor always say that. Find time to study the Word. Don't you say that, Melvin?
Did you have a comment?
Melvin.
Did you have a comment? No? Okay. I've been thinking recently, too, along these lines, like there's this perception that's not inaccurate, Caroline, like you mentioned about your niece, that there are younger generations are not as interested in church, that it's not as relevant, it doesn't connect in the same way, the expectations around attendance are just different, and the social, the status that brings or why. But I see through former students, I've taught courses in universities before, and have had undergraduate students. So I've watched people age through social media over the last 10 years or so, and there's a great interest. This gets back to something Donna said yesterday. There's a profound interest in spirituality right now, and in self-development and self-care. Lots of young people are interested in conversations that are, I think, in essence, asking some of the same questions that our faith communities are asking, but the language is so different, and the rigid sort of schedule of showing up on Sunday at 11, and the baggage that you mentioned of what people perceive church to be about or to mean. I remember a time when a student was genuinely, I just mentioned something about a religious community that was practicing anti-racism and was accepting of LGBTQ individuals or something. And I remember the student was absolutely shocked. It's like her mind, the paradigm of what church was in her mind was blown in that moment. She's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, it's a church that's like anti-racist and accepting of LGBTQ. She's like, they don't exist. I said, they might not be the majority, but they do exist, you know, and it was eye-opening to her. So there's some, I don't want this to sound pedantic or paternalistic, but there's some re-education that there are spaces of, there are some spaces that are providing or could provide some things that it's not that younger folks are just not interested in spirituality, or tending to their interior lives. There's a great interest in that. Oh, Donna, the comment you made that I referenced and didn't finish my thought about was how popular yoga and meditation and mindfulness are in wide swaths of younger generations. It's super popular. And then, like you said, Caroline, but they walk by our building and assume that nothing like that's going on inside, or there's no touch point, and it's going to be, oh, they're going to want my money, they're going to want my time, they're going to want me to show up and dress a certain way, look a certain way. I'll stop talking. It's just things that cross my mind. Here, Donna, if there's any others.
This is a very important place to move in on what we could do, because the belonging is something that happens in phases. Like your niece, maybe she's into Tai Chi. Maybe people are visibly on the lawn doing Tai Chi, you know, with a trainer. And people see that as they go by. And they see it as they go by and go by and go by. And maybe somebody, a tourist, gets off the trolley and says, wow, I would love to do that right now. I'm having a terrible time just being a tourist. I'm going to go move my body a little bit. And there's a way for her to have an outer ring to Tai Chi or yoga experience next to a church. And then there's some kind of meditation group. I really do think it's these movement practices and meditation that are palatable to those who have been, and let's just forgive ourselves for whatever part we had in this, for people who have been morally harmed and spiritually harmed. It's a whole category of moral harm and moral injury, spiritual injury. We see it in vets all the time. You know, they like to call it PTSD, but it's moral injury. I went to war. It was awful. Nobody explained to me why I was over there hurting people. I'm back. Nobody cares about me. You know, and some people judge me and put me down, and at least I belonged over there, you know. I had friends. Some of them I lost. So the moral injury of war, combined with the moral injury of pedophilia, and it's not just in the Catholic Church. It is not just in the Catholic Church. But and it wasn't just sexual harm, it was also hypocrisy at the highest levels, right? What do the spiritual but not religious people say to you? It just has to be authentic for me. I can't lie about God. I don't know what God is. I don't believe in God. If I walk in a church, I'm lying about God. And I'm not going to be hypocritical about God. Whereas most of our members are quite willing to be hypocritical about God. Because it's a show. It's a show. I mean, if you talk to them, you know, right after their husband died, they'll say, he never believed in God. I don't know if he's going to go to heaven. Or she'll say, I don't know what I think. But in church, all the words will be said, everything will sound right. So younger people are refusing to adapt to the hypocrisy of it, which I think is kind of a cool thing, that somebody wants to be sincere about God and to wrestle with Scripture and to wrestle with God and to come to an honest relationship. Those are exciting things. So the moral injury that has hurt your niece, and then add the gay thing to it. There's a huge generational issue that's happened, whereas people my age in their 70s, we don't get it, but we get it. You know, you can be taught to understand. But people my kids' age is in their 30s, 100% are, so what? What's the problem? What they never, it never occurred to them that there was a problem. I was taught that it was a terrible thing to be gay, and it sticks with you, you know. I remember when my friend Susan said to me when I was in my 30s and was already being educated to be more open-minded about LGBTQ stuff. We were rooming together at a church conference, and she said, "Hey, Donna, you know I'm gay." And I said to her, with all the pomp of a kid, I said, "Well, Susan, that's cool, but let's not tell anybody about it. You know, we have so many other important things we're working on." And she was destroyed by my saying that to her. And she let me know it. And when I think about that sort of moral certainty that was so awful to her, my friend, you know, I'm just ashamed. And now, I mean, in the United Church of Christ, if you are not open and affirming, and remember, we went through this whole process, and it was okay to be open, but all of my congregations are not affirming. Open, okay, anybody can come, but affirming, no way. If you make that argument to a 30-year-old today, they think that you're just punishmentalist, you know? You're shaming and blaming, and you think you're better than other people, and who are you to think that? So you take the experience of veterans, which is very obvious to everyone. You take the experience of ongoing homophobia in religious institutions. You take pedophilia, which is, I think, again, more about, it's certainly about sexual violence, but it's also about the priest did that. You know, how can anybody, like, I mean, how do you do anything? And the Catholic rates of disappearance of congregations are even stronger than the Protestant rates because of that directly. But when you see that, it's a lot of moral injury to get over for a person. So if something really positive isn't happening in a way that is safe enough for that niece to take one step closer, I mean something really positive, I don't know how we're going to do it. I mean, I really don't. Here.
We do it by doing it. And part of the real reason I raised the issue is about what, as we think about this, and what is our curb appeal? You know, what are people seeing when they come by as a way to know? So we begin to do that. We pick the one project, right, in each church. And as a unit together, y'all, that's what I'm gonna lift up, because we're cells to a body. How do we show from the outside that the inside is different, that it is warm? And so that was really the curb appeal piece of, as we do what we're doing, we've made this commitment, so we're doing it. How do we let our communities know as they walk past and drive past and ride past? So that was the real reason I kind of lifted that.
A lot of churches put solar up. It makes a big difference to environmentally concerned younger people. And just the presence of solar announces something. It says, we care. You look really different with solar on your hat than with tile on your hat. And I have seen that done with community partners who are environmentalists, who then become a part of helping the church do that. And it's a good thing to do, period, but it's got a curb appeal to it. Yeah.
In light of, just a quick aside, in light of that, yesterday Caroline had shared that someone had stopped and was taking a photo of our sign. And which sign was that outside? The big one, okay. So that might be unrelated to this. But anyway, a part of loving ourselves, I think, something I took away from time with therapists and counselors. Part of loving oneself is knowing oneself and being honest about oneself and who you really are. And I think that works with congregations and groups as well. And I say that in light of my experience with another congregation I worked with some years ago, who constantly compared themselves to another congregation down the street, basically. And this congregation was more of a non-denominational, big lights, big show, that type of, more evangelical, more conservative in theology and background and practice. And this congregation, a Presbyterian church, was much smaller, maybe 70 people on a Sunday. But they had so much going on during the week because while they compared themselves on the one hand, and that wasn't helpful, they also knew that they were more of an artistic community, they were a more quirky community, they were a community that it was an interesting mix of people. Some folks who had a more more of a college background, mixed with a more blue collar background, and but everybody was just a little different. And they had found each other some way, and they were just leaning in to just be, and this was something the pastor kept encouraging, the pastor I was working with, but she just kept encouraging the congregation members to stop comparing yourself to the congregation down the street and really lean in and embrace who you are. And that's part of the asset mapping internally within a congregation, is just owning your strengths that you have. We can never be strong. Part of the asset training that I did in the ministry in the Delta that I mentioned yesterday I would go and work with community members to say, we quit comparing ourselves to all the things that we don't have. That's the deficit mindset of always thinking all the things that we can't do are the things that we don't have. It's self-defeating, it's exhausting, it's tiresome, it doesn't get us anywhere at the end of the day. But really be clear on the things that give us energy, the things that make our community who we are, and be really strong in those things and strengthen ourselves in those things. And that doesn't mean that we don't have growing edges and that we shouldn't try new things or open ourselves to new opportunities, but to be comfortable simply with who we are. And that congregation grew over the years, not numerically to astronomical numbers, but they grew in the sense of we do love artistic things, and we do love creative things, and we are just a little different, and that is who we are. And we may never be a 1,000-member congregation, but we can love the community members, and we can be present, and we can be a welcoming space, and we can do these things and find innovative ways to open new space and to hold space in our community. But first, finding an ability to just rest and be present with what they as a congregation, who they are and what they can offer. I'll stop rambling now too.
That's a really good point. Nobody wants to be around somebody who's uptight. You just don't, there are plenty of uptight people you can be around, but why bother? And one of the best things I've heard over the years and mostly I talk to women about this subject, but when a woman really wants to get married, just really wants to find a man, the best thing she can do is stop trying so hard, right? Haven't you heard that? Just, enough already. And I swear to God, every time she actually does stop trying so hard, whether this is a counselee or a friend, somebody will walk into her life, and it's happy, as opposed to grabbing. So I do think there's an attitude of not grabbing for young people that is really important, because it objectifies them. It turns them into an object. We want you because you can carry tables. And that's, yeah.
I was just thinking about Esau and Jacob. And
Yes.
He came out the womb grabbing, and he already had his blessings upon him. Didn't have to do all of that. Didn't have to. And curb appeal. I like that, because everybody I like my house to have a nice curb appeal. Like if somebody passed by and say, well, I like the grass manicure, that's a nice looking, like my church. I love in my church, I'm the first one there on Sunday morning. I open the gate, I make sure the AC on and all that, but the first thing I got to do is start picking up trash when I get there. And then I'm out of breath, I'm tired because I got to do other stuff. You know, but as soon as I get there, I got to get a garbage bag, put my gloves on, and walk all the way around the church to pick up beer cans, just styrofoam plates, just all kind of stuff that's in front of making the church look real bad. So it's just.
That's just a very moving story. Apropos of what you were saying about, if I ask somebody to serve food to somebody, they'll do it. I wonder if you could ask somebody to help you pick up the trash and just do it with you. And they don't have to come to church. Oh, they don't get up that early. Well, that's another question. Yeah, wanting young people and having your services at 11 a.m. always struck me on Sunday morning, kind of like, you know, crazy. Let me just run through the rest of these slides. So, belonging. We might take the binary out of that word and say, oh, it's the insiders who belong and the outsiders who don't belong. The outsiders belong to other things, other communities. They do have communities, neighborhoods, etc. And let's just say that we would all like to belong. And I'll tell you a story about that. NYU, my New York City congregation was on the campus of NYU, which is a 60,000 person university in the middle of New York City. And every year they make the students read one book, the entering class. And they do a ton of research about what kind of students leave the campus, what kind of faculty leave, what's really on the minds of people. And year after year, they discover that the sentence that most people click, why did you leave NYU, is, I didn't feel like I could belong there. And haven't you heard people say that about schools or churches or even families? Like people will say, I just didn't belong, that wasn't my people. And so belonging is a profound urgency in this society. And there's also a ton of research that says the current lack of civility and terrible civic discord, we don't feel like we belong to each other. You know, in New York, small town, big city, people really are saying, I don't know how to talk to people across political lines. There's new research that shows that if a young person comes home to her Democratic family and says, I'm going to marry a Republican, that they flip out. In the way people used to flip out if a Jew was going to marry a Christian. That families don't want their children to marry across political lines. That's how distant people are from each other. They're not belonging. The absence of belonging, I don't think we'll ever know how much the ongoing persistent racism in our society breaks our hearts. All of our hearts. How can that be? How can that be? Sexism, the same thing. It is International Women's Day today. And I'm still grieving the lack of respect for womanly things in my life, as are many people. And I think men too. The loss of volunteerism, we talked about that. Volunteerism was a beautiful thing, but it doesn't fit with this economy right now. The marginalizing of others, poverty, and absence of leadership. And those are the kind of big structural things that not belonging leads to. But I think it also leads to pervasive anxiety, a lack of inner peace, which is what religion is about. It's the combination of inner and external peace. Addictions, which are obviously growing. I mean, it's enormous what's going on. Several of my community ministers I talked about earlier started harm reduction programs out of their community ministry. They're running organizations of 20 or 30 people right now because that's where harm reduction is going. And people need help with it. But finally, for me, there's this, if I were to answer the question of curb appeal, I would say show some people having some fun. You know, any kind of fun. Singing, dancing. Fun that is not about something you have to pay for. Playing cards, playing bingo. Kids playing jump rope, hopscotch. I mean, a giant hopscotch that adults could do too. The absence of belonging, which is our product, we belong to each other and to God. That's our product. It's the absence of belonging that is causing all this trouble, stem from a sense of someone feeling like an outsider with nowhere to belong. And John Donahue, the Irish monk and poet, says spirituality is a process of homecoming, where you belong, where everybody knows your name, where when you go, they can't throw you out. I mean, you know all these sentences. So we are dealing with a cultural catastrophe that we could resolve. We just have to figure out how to help it along. And frankly, the good news is we're small enough to do it in small ways. We don't have to do it for everybody. We just have to do it for a few people. And psychologists call these alienations or otherizing or not belonging very heavy language, but I want to get it in your frame. They call it the loss of a transcendent narrative, that we don't have a story we all fit into. So when you don't have a story you fit into, like America's the land of the free and the home of the brave, well, not when George Foreman gets shot like that. What's that about? So we're not the land of the free and the home of the brave. Then what are we? We're people who are trying to be something. Or narrative deficit disorder as the leading cause of addictions of all kinds. And some people are just addicted to their cell phone. But you know, there's a lot of addictive behavior. Narrative deficit disorder means you don't have enough story around which to get up in the morning and gather. So you pick and choose. You have one story for this and one story for that. And what rushes in to these kind of narrative deficits and transcendence absences is totalitarianism. Right? So people, big people, power people, Putin kind of people, run in and fill up the gaps. So it's a very dangerous thing, which I hope motivates you to want to do something about it. So let's just skip this one. It's a source of his joke. I already said it. Let's go on to the next one. They've taken a break.
Did you want to talk about this one, Donna?
Yes, thank
Oh,
you.
okay.
Thank you.
I think it was delayed. I just want to make sure it changed. Okay.
That's fine. So clubs can provide belonging, right? Absolutely. Let's take a break. Let's take a break. Rachel, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we really want to have some time to talk about the thematics of the next training. So how many more slides are there? I don't have my papers in front of me. Why don't you give me the next one, too?
Yeah, let's take a look. It
Let's
seems
just
like
see.
there's 1, 2.
Because we don't need to do the mixed groups.
Okay.
Yeah, let's take a 10-minute break.
Okay. Yeah, and then there's the next section here.
And
So-
we'll do that. Then we'll do the next session.
okay.
And we'll also do some time to, they really want to talk about a different format, I think, for the next group, you know,
So-
evenings and such, so.
Okay, sounds good. I'll just keep this slide up and we'll be ready when you get back.
Good. Okay.
Great.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hello, is that Becky?
Yeah.
Hey.
How do we remind them to remind the commenters to hold their mics close to their mouth?
I'll send a message to Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, I already texted him, but he
I
he
know.
hasn't responded, so I don't know if he's got it on silent or what.
Sure. I know. Unfortunately, there isn't much we can do other than remind them, but
No, I understand that fully, but I appreciate your help.
yep, of course, of course.
Thanks.
All right, we'll see you in 10 minutes, I think is the
Yep.
plan. All right, thanks, Becky.
Ready to go back to play? So Rebecca, I think I'll, at the top of this, this will be our final session of today. And we can go till 4 or not, depending on how our energy peaks or doesn't peak. I just realized I needed some coffee, so bad. So I can power through these slides, or we can make some plans about our next time together, which will likely be in May. I've already heard a few things about what it should be. And I think if we were to plan it and do a good job of making sure we owned it, and that would be a good way to go. And I might suggest that we do 5 sessions the next time, 1 at each of the churches. Or do 4 and say we've already been here. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so what do you think about that? And I wondered if you wanted a tour of this place, those of you who haven't seen it. I think that would be a good idea. So let's save some time to do that for sure. Because the people in the cohort may have ideas for each other about how to use it. I'm very interested in that courtyard and what you could do. The other thing that a lot of churches are doing around curb appeal, just to address that, is not just solar, but there's a lot of architectural interest in opening glass so that people can see in. I was just having dinner the night before I came out with a Japanese architect who talked about that and how interesting it is to, if that whole wall were to be, are you landmarked? Yeah. Okay, forget. Well, it is a good thing. Yeah. So you can't do anything like that. Okay. But if you could allow people to see in, it would maybe help the toe dipping, or maybe it wouldn't, but it depends on what they see. I mean, for example, if that wall were open and these pews were out, this center aisle were out of here, and at Judson we put in a really gorgeous floor, so dancers, a spring floor, do you know what a spring floor is? It's a sprung, thank you. Thank you very much. I knew we had a theater guy here. The sprung floor was just so appreciated by the artist, but it's also stunningly beautiful and cleans, you know. So yeah, we'll take a tour. But anyway, that's my first suggestion, is that we do something at each of the 4 congregations, and we don't have to organize that. And the second one would be that when we're in those places, that we really hear about what's going on there. There's a lot going on at your church. Yes. Right. And there's clearly a lot going on here, too. I mean, an awful lot. It sounds like your 2 places are less active, or, I mean, what I want would be to get an introduction to your site, not just physically, but, you know, tell us the story. And maybe we get more people. It doesn't have to be just 5. We could do a whole, you know, evening with people from the congregation about what the program is and such. But I think for the moment, my questions would be, do you want more theoretical, spiritual, theological, or more practical, or blend? Because usually John Franco might even be here in person the next time, hoping you know, we're all hoping for COVID numbers to be all right.
I was going to say, my suggestion or feeling right now would be, what time is it, 3 o'clock? 3:03. I would love to hear more about what types of advice you would give us as congregations for what we might do for the next several months. And I know part of that will be me checking in with each congregation, and I'll help in that. So I realize that's going to be part of it. But what are some things you would suggest on the practical level? And a tour of the building, and we already know that the dates are forthcoming for the next training. We'll wait on that. It's kind of where I am, but I'm at a very saturated point with good stories and good theoretical information, and yeah.
The program was planned for a larger group, so the second it's a smaller group, it just makes a difference in how you deal with material and process it. Yeah, I'd be happy with that. And I fully expect to be in touch with you in between. Maybe not between now and May, so much as it's so close, but to be able to do individual consults with you to help you sell whatever ideas you come up with to your congregations, unless an outsider would unsell it, in which case you never met me. You know, this is all stuff you came up with on your own. But, I mean, by the end of the 2-year period, I'm going to, by hook or by crook, know what your next steps are. I already kind of know what some of the next steps are here. They're rationalizing some of these business systems that are, you know, you've done all the right things, and now you kind of have to do backfill and figure out and go into phase 2 about how to do them. And hi. We're just talking about our next session. Good. Yep. I know you want your leg up. So I was just saying that by the end of the program, and we're going to wrap relatively soon, we're going to take a tour of your building, and then we're going to, next time we get together, date uncertain, but probably around May, to keep the momentum going. I don't want to have to start over with you in the fall. I mean, I want to do it somehow sooner. And we'll meet at each site. And we will likely do some evening work, just so more people can come. And we might have an open house, a piece of it where we work together as the people who are managing the process, and then we introduce it to a larger group in each congregation. And I was saying, my goal is to have worked with you each individually enough so that you have a plan for the next things to do. And you're well on your way to doing them, or you've already done them. And I think here, I know already it's about curb appeal in a direction. I know it's already about rationalizing some of these systems, because you're already doing the community outreach, but you sound a little uncertain about are we charging the right amount of money? Are we staffing up to it right? How do we, and I thought Becky's comment about how do we get to know our community partners so that they become real partners and not tenants.
One of the challenges I think we've identified at St. Charles that my guess would be the same at most congregations is that this has been a very pastor-heavy congregation. And in a lot of ways, I step into that very naturally and become the gatekeeper, which then leads to more pastor burnout and exhaustion. So that's part of why I think the staffing question is so important for us. And then also why it's so important to bring so many lay people along into this process over the next 2 years.
Really important. And some of these processes can last for decades. You know, if you really start to mess with a building as you're experiencing, you can be out of business for a while, you can be back in business, and pastors don't always stay that long. So you really have to be ready to manage a pastoral tradition. Ah, belonging.
Donna, can you please repeat what people are saying? I cannot hear.
Yes, I can, because we're not moving the microphone around enough. So I can definitely. All right, so we have 2 frames for our next time together. One is rotating places, the second is evening. And I think the third was what I was saying is to get you started on a plan that is your plan. So there may be some things you do together. I don't know that yet. I think depending on are you all in the same neighborhoods or in very different neighborhoods? Okay. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Right.
Donna, I'm sorry, please repeat. I can't hear.
So are they in the same neighborhoods, and 2 are and 2 are? And then Sarah said that in New Orleans, things are relatively close, period. So, and my comment was, you may not be doing the same things. So one is about 5 minutes apart. So that's important. I mean, that just screams to me partnership. I mean, it really does, because you don't want to compete with each other any more than you already are. So I think if you do these kind of political listening tours, which I'm going to highly recommend, you should go together, because you'll triple your information. Yeah. Who are your city council people? Are they the same? That's an important, so they're talking about whether they have the same city council people, and I would say that that would be a coach kind of conversation, and maybe something that gets set up, you know, rationally based on who's got who. But it would give you a chance to get together again, and I guarantee you would learn something you don't know in that conversation about an industry that's either pulling out or moving in, about demographic changes in your area, about harm reduction, about, I don't know, I just don't know, because it'll be a surprise. Yeah.
Yesterday we were talking about grants and foundations, and if the cost of subscription to that is cost prohibitive, could we, as a cohort, get a subscription to that foundation website to then talk together collaboratively about what might be available that fits each unique situation?
Brilliant idea. And you can also go to one of your partners who already has a subscription and ask to use their subscription, or to, you know, ask around. You may have a member of one of your congregations that does that kind of work as a not-for-profit somebody. But it would be a great thing to do, to have a grant writer come and give a workshop to you about New Orleans foundations. I mean, I know that, and you could get a grant writer who would work for you, I'm sure. You might have to pay them, but I'm betting there's somebody in one of your congregations or your organizations I'll bet the Lutheran bishop knows who the grant writers are. I mean, and they probably have a subscription. And so all of a sudden, you see you're creating a partnership and you're moving in with the higher ups in your denomination who are also a great place for you to interview for information. So in your organizations, you don't just have bishops 8 generations ago, you have bishops now. And they should know what you're talking about and really become a part of your process. And they will have access to these kind of foundation resources. And the very process of writing a foundation grant is a beautiful process. I love doing it. It's really dreaming on paper. Because you will, if you were to go to the New Orleans Community Foundation, for example, and just sit down and say, we see ourselves of having all these unused assets. What should we do with them? Talk to us. They will say, oh my God, I'm funding this school over here, and they just got thrown out of their place. Or, you know, serendipities like that, synergies like that. So I think you have a whole research, politicians, community foundations, subscribing to this, that would be good tasks to keep you moving together, and you would know a lot more by the next time we talked.
Donna?
And I would know a lot more because I would have seen the places.
If I could also offer a possible way that we can connect and do some of those things. I know at least 2 of the congregations are parts of Together New Orleans, which is an organization of congregations and other groups. And it's currently got a community lighthouse project going on that includes putting solar panels on rooftops of places of worship. But it's also a mechanism whereby some of us are already in touch with our elected officials and maybe a vehicle for us to use, although we could also do some of this independently.
Mm-hmm. The more you do together, the more impressed the people you're talking to will be. Trinity Wall Street in New York City is a major landholder, major real estate company, and it is currently funding bricks and mortars to do work on affordable housing, transitioning congregations that want to do affordable, might be able to do affordable, might have the zoning to do it, and is providing pre-development money to congregations who want to do that. And why are they giving it to us? Because every day they get 20 phone calls from around the world from people who want to do affordable. And they don't want to have that administrative burden. They want somebody to do it together. Because they can give you money if you're together. They can't give you money if it's your tradition they're promoting. So that's, and anything that looks like organization gets their respect. Anything that looks individual and like a cry for help does not. So I would prioritize those things. Okay, this has to do with May 26th to June 30th. Becky will not be here. So she hopes we don't change too much. We're planning on being earlier than that. All right, what else for the next time together? Are you being asked to do anything between now and May? I would have those meetings with politicians and find some, and maybe the New Orleans Community Foundation. I would do some of those things. And just call them introductory meetings. Don't prepare for them. You know, don't go in with an ask. Say, we'd like to know what you think we should do with our buildings in our neighborhoods. And we represent this cohort. I would have at least those 2 meetings, and I would find find a grant writer who would work with you once you got there. And it's only 3 months, so we're not going to overwork you. And if you want to do individual sessions with me, we'll just schedule one. So I'm assuming there'll be at least one between each, individual consult between each training. All right, I think we've reached the end of our energy, if not our time. So why don't we go on a tour of the building? Move around.